Right. Well, I think people are going to continue to come in, but I'm going to go in and start. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lynne Gackle, and I'm so glad that you could be with us this afternoon. By now, I think that almost everybody has had an opportunity to review the document that was created by this wonderful committee, the ACDA COVID-19 Response Committee. As promised, we are hosting this webinar to allow the committee to discuss the document and its contents and to provide their perspectives as they began to draft this important document. Today's comments will be limited to 1 hour, and we have a lot of material to cover. So we had thought that we had disabled the chat. I wanted to tell you that we probably don't have enough time for answering questions today. However, ACDA has set up on the ACDA app a place for you to submit questions that the committee will be fielding throughout the rest of the week, actually. So those questions can be found on the app under Forums, ACDA COVID Response Committee Report. So that's, again, Forums. So if you have a question, please do submit it there. You know, in appointing this committee, the executive committee of ACDA felt that it was really important that the members of the group would obviously be highly respected in their areas of expertise, and also that they would truly be representative of all of ACDA and its regions. You know, we're all in a planning mode, and I think that this has been a very unusual and a little bit overwhelming time for us, but we're planning for the fall. It was the desire of the EC to have a document that would be a positive statement, which would hopefully aid the whole membership as they plan for their teaching and rehearsing in the coming days, especially in the fall. The document does not make scientific statements about any of the research or the research that's even ongoing now, but rather it was an opportunity to make recommendations for scenario planning and individual instructional models to provide colleagues a starting place as they began to plan and vision within the next weeks, regardless of whatever their situation may be. When I sent out the email inquiries asking these individuals to consider being a part of the committee, within less than 24 hours, all of the committee had responded and had responded in the affirmative, and we're grateful for that. Jessica Annapolis agreed to chair the writing team, and she and the committee began to work diligently to create the final draft, which you received last week, less than 20 days from the date that they even agreed to serve on the committee. That's pretty remarkable in my opinion. At this time, I'd like to introduce the committee to you. And committee, if you would just wave and unmute, say hello, and then remute, I'd appreciate it. So first, the writing team, Jessica Annapolis, Chair, University of North Texas.
Hello.
Judy Bowers, University of Louisiana, Monroe.
Hello.
Edie Copley, University of Northern Arizona.
Hi.
And Thomas Wren, Colleyville Heritage High School in Texas.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Contributing authors are Lynn Brinkmeyer, Texas State University.
Hi, everyone.
Lou De La Rosa, West Valley College in San Jose, California.
Good afternoon.
Derek Fox, University of Nebraska at Omaha.
Hello.
Gretchen Harrison, Frontier Trail Middle School in Allegro Choirs of Kansas City.
Hi.
Joy Hirakawa, Bel Canto Youth Chorus of Bach Choir of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Hello, everyone.
Terry Johnson, Clayton State University in Georgia.
Hi, everyone.
Robin Lana, Cincinnati Youth Choir in Ohio.
Hi there.
Timothy Westerhouse, Gonzaga University in Washington.
Hello, everybody.
And Tesfa Wondamegmu, St. Olaf College in Northville, Minnesota.
Hey, everybody.
I think I got everybody at that point, yeah? Jessica, let me start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about the process for putting this document together and utilizing everybody's individual expertise, especially with such a short turnaround?
Yeah, as you noted, everybody is so enthusiastic on this committee, and what an awesome, passionate group of directors who were all just meeting the call to service. And so in thinking about, with a 2-week period, what could be done feasibly and what couldn't be done, we had to make some decisions. And the first was, how can we utilize the varied expertise on the panel without thinking about things that were outside of our expertise, right? So necessarily, you see that in the document, we didn't spend time talking about spacing of singers, issues related to aerosols and how far to stand between, because that information continues to evolve, right? And those data are continually being surfaced based on new and continuing research. So that's work that's best left to those researchers, those scientists. Epidemiologists are telling us a lot about those things. That's not our specialty. So that was something that we could decide we were not going to spend a lot of time on. Then we also put this a little bit in the introduction, but just to reiterate, the CDC guidelines, the local guidelines, many of the decisions are going to be made by our state governors with respect to opening in the fall and large gatherings and whether those kinds of things are making choir concerts a possibility. And context varies, right? Different parts of our country and different regions have different things that are being felt. And so maybe there are some things that are available to you in your context that are not available in other places. I can think of, for instance, there are some recommendations about utilizing adult volunteers. That's going to be really helpful in some contexts, maybe not possible in other contexts if they're not allowing volunteers or adults to enter the building. But so many of those things vary based on region. So what did we do? We decided we're choir directors, we're passionate, we can discuss planning. And we can give some guidance based on issues related to scenario planning. So you'll hear a little bit more about that, but essentially this is not a one size fits all. It's thinking about planning, understanding that that individual planning will be happening with each director, but let's get some ideas going and maybe get you to be thinking about some things that you should be considering in the various scenarios. We're all going through this in a little bit of confusion and a little bit of just wanting to be of assistance to you. And so we hope that that's what this document will accomplish for you.
Thank you, Jessica. I am Andre Thomas, the National Vice President of ACDA, and I am really excited about this document and really excited about this committee and the fact that they are the ACDA members. It was important to us that it not be just the executive committee, but that it should represent our entire membership. So with all that in mind, let's dive into this document and tell me what was included and how it was structured. Edie, can you help us?
Yeah, thanks, Andre. Well, this started with, of course, the call to serve on the committee, but then Jessica, Thomas, Judy, and I met on a Zoom meeting and to discuss how we're going to move forward to fulfill this charge. And we all agreed that we wanted to generate something that would be a helpful resource to choral directors, as well as to advocate for choral singing. And as you know, we're all trying to sort out what we're supposed to do this fall. So I think we're all looking for answers. And as Jessica just said, the research and the data is evolving. So we thought we needed to be very flexible. We need to look at things that will make our singers safe and connected. And so we developed this document so that it would have different scenario plans based on what's coming forward. We really didn't want to generate any kind of lesson plans or anything like that because everybody's situation is going to be different. But Lynne wanted some sort of framework for the national leadership meeting that was happening, I don't know, in 5 or 6 days. And so we all kind of went, okay, here we go. So the 4 of us on the writing team determined that we need to structure kind of the bones or the structure of the document for Lynne's meeting. So that would include the introduction, an advocacy statement, and then kind of a plan for instructional models based on the R&R areas or the general R&R areas, and then possibly an appendices that would have some other resources. Well, Jessica worked on the introduction, and later on she drafted the intro to the instructional models as well as the conclusion. And I just want to say that I thought Jessica was a phenomenal chair for this task force, and I'm really thankful for all of her work. Lynne Brinkmeyer worked on a really powerful advocacy statement, so thanks, Lynne, and I think she's going to talk more about this a little later in the webinar. And then we assigned the other 9 authors to an area of expertise at times. with members of the writing team. So like Lou De La Rosa and I worked on the collegiate model. Well, then the very next morning after our first meeting, Thomas sent us the first draft of the instructional model template, which was unbelievable. Like within less than like 10 hours, he had put together kind of the template for us, which provided us a way to go forward. We all wanted this document to be positive, to be encouraging, and provide lots of helpful resources using these different teaching scenarios. And also links to technology that would also be helpful to us in the days ahead. And I'm one of these people that this spring, like you have a week's notice to jump to go online. So I personally think that that was a wonderful addition to this document, the appendices, at which we're also going to get to later in this webinar. But I know that Thomas is probably going to talk a little bit more about the actual structure within the models, but it was an honor to serve on this response committee for ACDA. And I'm very proud of the work that everybody on this committee did to successfully complete this charge in record time. So thanks, Andre.
So true. Thank you, Edie. You know, one of the wonderful things about ACDA is that our membership is so multifaceted. It's diverse and it serves children and community youth choirs, K through 12, collegiate, church, and adult community choir directors. I noticed that you included information that would be valuable for each one of our constituency, every person in our membership, literally. Can you tell us a little bit more about the instructional models included throughout the document? Thomas, could you speak to that?
Absolutely. So as we started working on planning this, the goal was really to try to make something that would work for everybody, as Lynn said, that is part of our membership. And we knew that these instructional models were really going to become the heart of the document. You see just from the number of pages, it really becomes the heart of all of the work that we did to do that. We wanted to create a template that had some uniformity across that because we believe we're all looking at some similar situations. And then we also discussed looking at our R&R areas and how we group things together. And so you'll see where we landed on that was to group together our upper elementary and middle school choirs, our senior high choirs, our collegiate community choirs, our community, and you'll see in community we ended up doing children and adult together, and then the music and worship. Some questions have risen from that, especially from the elementary model, mostly asking why did we look at the upper elementary and not the elementary classroom teachers? And the honest answer to that is looking at our membership, we went to focus on elementary choir. And elementary choir tends to happen in those upper levels, and we did not address the elementary music teachers in that as part of our charge as ACDA. We kind of left that alone, moving there. I think all of us know what we all hope for. We're all kind of waiting on directives from our governments and our communities on what it is that we need to do. And as Jessica said, we did not make any attempts to lay that out because that's just not our expertise. The committee's expertise is in teaching. And so what we wanted to do is prepare the membership to be able to do whatever it is we have to do. I think us included, we just don't know what that is. And we probably are going to have that answer with a few days to prepare. And so the goal of the document was to lay out things to give our directors tools to be able to pivot very quickly and to make plans at the last minute of what we have to do. When we laid out the template, what we did was lay out instructional practices that all of us believe could be helpful in this situation. Certainly we began to look at technology, but in many cases also what to do without technology. I'm realizing that that can't always be the answer because all of our singers don't have access to those things. Speaking of access, then really trying to think about the equity issues and making sure that everyone still has access to singing and to choral music and it doesn't exclude anyone. And then looking into specific things that each committee member thought might be for their situation. Again, overall, not only providing those teaching resources, but thinking about how do we continue to build community and provide that for our singers. I think we all know that some of the most important work we do is really just taking care of people and the human beings that are in our choirs. And so trying to give some ideas and thoughts to that. So again, our goal was not to give specifics. We would love to know specifics. I would love to know specifics so that I could prepare to teach myself. But what we have to do right now is be prepared to do anything that is asked of us. And that's what the goal of the document was.
Wow, Thomas, these models really sound like they will be useful for our directors and they will help them in planning for the future. I am especially appreciative that there's that common thread running throughout all of this of equity issues throughout each one of those models. Let's start with the middle school, junior high, upper elementary model. Derek, how did you and Judy approach your planning?
One of the things that was most important for us when we began to do this work is to helicopter out and get a broader look at our membership and recognize that we, just like Jessica said, we have a variety of people who are represented in our membership and a variety of experiences. And so for the work that we were doing to put out in such a quick time, it was important that we gave guidelines instead of creating a blueprint that you could lay over your program, because if that was our starting point, we would fail before we started, because everybody's blueprint is going to be different, and we're going to be living in a house that we're building at the same time. We all are. And so it was to provide some guidelines for some things you may have already thought about that you could share within your district or within your pool of people. But some folks may not be at the point where they're ready to discuss at this level. So we provide them the guidelines to be able to speak to maybe administrators, or even in our group, you know, we mentioned volunteers, faculty, and staff. It may be a discussion that you have with your PE teachers about how you can work together. Some of us are a one-person show in our building, but at this point, we need to begin to think bigger and how we can connect across different avenues and help each other work out our problems through this pandemic. One of the other ways that we could do that is through the professional choral collective that I've started, bringing together lots of our members to create some of these lessons that people are looking for. Though we didn't have the time in this short amount of time to create some of these things, we have crowdsourced a magnificent group of teachers that represent a variety of lived experiences, which is important for the equity component, so that you can begin to go in and look at those and use them and modify them, which is what's most important, because we're all going to have to pivot regardless of what we may have thought this would be. We're going to have to pivot, and these guidelines will help you do that. And so will these lessons. So I urge you to take a look deeply into those links and find some things. And what was really important about the Choral Collective is providing you the opportunity to speak to people who created those lessons, so that we can begin to create our own local cohorts to master our craft around the situation that we're handed in the fall.
Thank you, Derek. Tesfa? Oh, Judy, I'm sorry.
I can jump in if you need to, Doc.
No, I think we better go to Judy, because we work together, and I know I don't want to get in trouble with her.
Well, I will say, Derek and I, in our meetings, quickly realized we have a lot of overlap, but I think we come at it differently. So his part, you know, we all have to be musicians, and we have to have scholarly area. His scholarly area is he is dealing with teachers. He's looking at the world. I've got lots of ideas how his model may allow so much more communication. But for my purposes, when I started to think, what do I care about? Mine is really based on equity. For my whole life, I thought that everybody ought to be able to do music. Not sing at the Met, but do music. And so he's telling you what the teachers are saying, what people are doing, and it's magnificent. So I went back to, what is it that lets us have kids participate? It's that we do developmental teaching. We start where somebody is, but because we're making music, everybody's participating, everybody's getting a chance to make music, and it's not a drill on theory, or you're not able to do this, I audition you out. It's a big deal to me. So my appendix at the back shows you just a few examples of things that would help you. Right off the bat, I teach my students 10 steps. If your kids are in the land of terrible, don't start at wonderful. That's step 10. Start them somewhere else. The second part, if your kids don't sing expressively, it doesn't come to them. It's not like sing more musically. That doesn't happen. Tell them how. So I have my little list of rules for expressive singing, and they're not magic. They're just how I do it. Make up your own rules, but give them a way to succeed in our classrooms. And that brings me to what I really want to say right here. We sing, we teach, we do pedagogy, and we build community. And I think we all build as much community as we can, but I think we mostly sing. That's not a criticism, that's an observation. And I think that has to change right now. If you had me sitting in a room on a computer, which I might blow up at some point and lose the whole day, we can't have those intense rehearsals for an hour on something that's too hard for them. So let's don't be too hard for them right now. Back up. Teach them vocabulary words. For the love of God, teach them what musicians know. Attach it to their music. Put up a word wall. Every time you teach something in the music, put it up on the wall. I put in my concepts, there's a sequence. Teach this and this and this. All of those kinds of things. You're still doing music, but you're attaching learning to it. And that's my opinion, but there it is. The other thing I want to say to you, we need to collaborate. And I think teachers all over this country are hysterical right now because they want someone to tell them. So do I. I don't yet know what I'm doing. I trust that I will by the first day of school because someone will decide you fit in this box and I will do it. So we need collaboration, but you don't need it with us. You don't need it with the executive committee. You need it with the teachers in your district, or you need it with people who have schools like yours, or you need it with people in your state that are leaders. I told Thomas, everyone in Texas can just call Thomas. He did not laugh at that, but we need to help each other. We need to help each other. And I also, this is just an observation. There's no data for this, but I have Facebook with billions of my students, and they all went through some kind of grieving in the spring for missing their students, as did we, and their students would post all these ridiculous drive-bys and sobbing and waving and all of that. We missed each other. Several teachers have said, above all things musical, we are going to start the year with community building. And several people have posted things on Facebook, such as my first 3 weeks with my kids, it's about community. A little music, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little sight reading. It's about, so all of those things you can share. You know, how are you going to get to know your 6th graders or your 4th graders? How am I going to get to know my freshmen? They don't yet trust me. Trust is what we have with our other kids. We don't have that. So I'm now going to hush and say, collaborate, communicate, and make decisions. Being a choral conductor is making good decisions. Please make decisions. And I'm done.
And we'll just applaud that. Thank you, Judy. Now you've summarized that so well, and it's applicable to all ages. Tesfa, with that said, can you give us a little bit of information about the senior high model?
You know, it's terrifying following a Dr. Bauer sermon. And we all needed to hear that sermon today, but I'm going to try my best and just build on what she just left us with. She talked about community building. And one of the ways that Thomas and I talked, we talked about using technology, even in face-to-face instruction, to create that seamless pivot. We've been using the word pivot, but trying to make that pivot as seamless as possible is something that we can work on during face-to-face instruction. So imagine that you found platforms, and these are things that you can see in the senior high model, platforms where you can have online game activities with your students, platforms where you can figure out ways that they can communicate with each other using different apps in source that they already communicate with. This is something I would encourage people to investigate, even if you're not in high school, is look at some of those sources that are listed in the senior high document, because I think that's a way that you can get students using technology and excited about technology and also still making music face-to-face. Another thing that we talked about in the senior high document was how important it is that we figure out a way to make the music match the amount of rehearsal time that we have. So obviously we have to do some changing and modifying of rep. So one of the things we talked about was going into resources like Core more. There's this great free resource where they're giving you practice tracks created already for you free of charge of music that exists in the public domain or through Creative Commons copyright licensing. Your students can hear their own parts. But one of the things, Thomas, I thought was brilliant that he came up with is like, even if students would be willing to create those parts themselves, like as student leaders. So students are singing with a voice that they're familiar with. And creative ideas on how to get all students participating by submitting maybe even a solo version and say, all right, maybe at the beginning of the year, we'll start in smaller groups, solo and ensemble. So usually that happens in certain districts towards the end of the year, maybe early spring, but maybe flipping the semesters and having more of a solo focused or small ensemble focus at the beginning of the year until we have more information about it. And I know Thomas and I have spent a lot of time talking about that in the high school model and making sure that the teachers have the appropriate resources to be able to pivot seamlessly between scenario 1, 2, or 3. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Tesfa. I noticed in looking at the document under community choirs, you folks included both children's community youth and adult community choirs. What was the thinking there? Gretchen, can you help us?
I would be happy to. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Sorry. Great. All right. So I was on a team with Robin Lana and Joy Hirakawa. And when we evaluated and started to construct the framework for our area, we found many more similarities than differences. We took the age issue out. We knew that we were not going to be planning lessons based in literature. So we took those components out and came up with many more similarities. The strongest similarity is that the choirs we concentrated on are independent choirs governed in most part by a board of directors or some other partnering organization. As independent organizations, many of the questions and protocols for the choirs we determined were identical or very similar. We considered risk, technology, adaptability to the online rehearsal environment, and the need to develop and nurture the community part of community choirs. As most of these choirs function without outside support, we also felt it necessary to offer detailed suggestions about how to approach return to our rehearsal spaces and our performance areas. Robin and Joy are going to focus a little bit more on the specifics of our task. We recognize that our work is most likely just the first step forward, and we look forward to even more complete information as the COVID-19 situation continues to evolve. It has been an honor to serve ACDA in this way. Robin?
So when we were considering the children and youth specific end of it, we came across, as Gretchen said, many similarities, and then there were some differences that we highlighted in our part of the document, specifically how to enter a facility in the rehearsal space or the building. What do the parents do when they're waiting? They probably aren't going to enter the building, so where do they go? How do you help guide them? And we don't have those answers for everybody because everybody's rehearsing in different spaces and has different guidelines and different partnerships. So you have to work with your governing organization or your partnering organization, figure that out. How do you staff and volunteers for the safety of the children online? That could be taking attendance, it could be troubleshooting technology, that could be helping in chat rooms. A lot of different ways that the children are going to be different than the adults in the community setting. So we tried to identify those and give a launch pad for creativity, but not dictating really what to do. We recognize that states and regions will all have their own protocols and different challenges, and we just hope that we were able to offer some guidance and guidelines for the choral teaching community. I was asked in our little group to talk about community in the children's choir and the adult choir community, and so I'll just say cut and paste everything that Judy said about community. It's crucial to choirs in general. It is crucial to the community choir programs because without that, there's no school that's dictating they have to show up for class. We are not giving them a grade. So building the community, building that desire is going to be so important. The children and youth are going to be most likely, a lot of them, having online fatigue through their day. They're going to be doing a lot of online learning. So what do we do that sets us apart, that makes them still want to come online yet one more time in their day to come and be a part of what we do? Again, we don't have the answers. We didn't offer the answers, but we offered some creative ideas to be a launch pad for that thinking. Be part of the social community, and building the community is going to be critical for us for retention of our singers from last year, recruiting new singers, and just the existence of our program. And Joy's going to talk a little bit about adults.
Yeah, hi everybody. It's been really a pleasure to work with these wonderful colleagues here, so thank you. One aspect that is maybe a little bit more peculiar, or maybe more of concern for the adult community, is risk tolerance. There are many adults who might be at higher risk due to age or health complications, or they may live with somebody who is at risk. And so there's a question of how to support these singers and how to provide for differences of risk tolerance, knowing that, again, you want to maintain the sense of community with everyone, and you want to make sure everyone's wishes and their circumstances are honored and respected. So that's something more specific, I think, maybe to adults than it might be to some of the youth, although it really overlaps with everybody. Additionally, with adults, you have the question of expertise and comfortability with technology, and access to high-speed internet can vary widely between community groups and individuals. So for adults, you may find that you might need to develop instructional resources to teach them how to use the technology that you're going to be using in your rehearsal, which is an additional layer of your preparation that you're going to have to be thinking about. Just something else to be thinking about. And then, of course, there's the access at home, because more adults are working from home. You also have children and other people who might be using the internet for instruction, for schooling, what have you. So there's going to be some planning within the households, so you avoid technology traffic jams, so to speak. So everybody has their time. Your internet doesn't slow down too much, because if you're doing any kind of quick back and forth rehearsing or echoing kinds of things with music, you're going to need to have your internet being quite fast. So there's additional planning that needs to be communicated to your people to anticipate and be ready for that. And again, circling back to this question of community, for a lot of adults, the choir is their community. Those are the people that they really gravitate back to, and they rely on it for a sense of connection. So the loss of this regular personal contact is really enormous for many adults. I hope that you all take the time to explore many of the ideas that are in this document, because they are wide-reaching. And if you don't find an answer in the community choir place, I can bet dollars to donuts that you're going to find it someplace else in the document. So don't feel that just because, oh, I don't teach upper elementary, I don't need to bother looking at that. You might be surprised that you'll find some interesting resources, as well as the very extensive appendix. So kudos to everybody on the committee for the really terrific work. And really, you're going to take a lot of time to dive into everything that's available here. So thank you for the honor of being on the committee.
Thanks, guys. I know that I am going to be looking at that right away, because I'm going to have an adult community course with students, and I'm going to look for as many ideas to keep those people motivated. I also understand that collegiate choirs have different challenges, but also with that, you have the potential for more leaders to run sectional or lead various small groups. I know we're going to be thinking about various chats with 10 different graduate students, covering each one of those as we work with our older singers. How did you approach the planning for the collegiate model, Lou?
Well, we have both 2-year and university incorporated in the collegiate model. And so there's going to be different styles there. For me, I'm at a 2-year college, and so I would be using section leaders. And Edie was at a university, and so she was talking about using graduate students and section leaders. So there's that. I will say that one of the benefits of this committee work were the discussions that we had with one another, and working with Edie was just an absolute joy. We spent many hours on Zooms, and they went by in just a twinkle of an eye. I've had a similar experience with the Western Region Task Force for Innovation, which we convened about a week ahead of this study. We're actually looking, we've been diving deep, and we're looking at incorporating videos and discussions, interviews. In fact, Jay Saplan from Hawaii has already posted 2 interviews to our YouTube channel. That's ACDA Western Region on the YouTube channel, if you want to check those out. He has discussions with undergraduate instructors and graduate instructors as well. And we're also going to put up some mock rehearsals as well, so people can get an idea of pacing, perhaps, different ideas. We're still researching in preparation for our report, which is coming out in early July. And in doing so, I was alerted that there were a couple of inconsistencies and incomplete information that was given in the collegiate scenarios for 2 tremendous studies. And so I wanted to clarify those right now. David Newman has documented in writing and on YouTube multiple scenarios for achieving physical distance and real-time singing with no latency. If you go to artsongcentral.com, that's artsongcentral.com, he has a link to a page, and I think every choral director should look at this resource. There are multiple scenarios. Some of them involve an FM transmitter and using car speakers to, have a drive-in, and others are using hard wiring and wireless mics. So check that out. The other one, Ian Howell of New England Conservatory has similarly documented his work in SoundJack, which is a low latency audio video communication platform for live one-to-one or one to very small ensemble singing. So if you go to ianhowellcountertenor.com, again, ianhowellcountertenor.com, and click in the upper right corner for the link, you'll see that in the preface to his work, he describes other possible platforms, including Jamulus, Jamkazam, and Jacktrip. And if you're hip to that, great. And if you're not, he gives you kind of a lowdown on how to do this. It's not inconceivable that we could be doing these things. So anyway, check it out. We did not find these specific guides in our previous research, which is admittedly fast-tracked. So I encourage directors to consider these physically distanced options for live singing with negligible latency. It's up to each director to discern what may work for them. Again, the Western Region Task Force for Innovation will release a report in early July. In it, we will address elementary, including general music, and 2-year college specifically, in addition to all of the other R&R areas presented in this national document. It's been my absolute pleasure and honor to serve on this committee.
Thanks so much, Lou. I took the liberty to put into the chat, if you'll check it, Lou, to be sure that I've spelled everything correctly, both of the links that you mentioned. And so thank you so much for giving us that updated information as well. Music and worship is such an important thrust within our organization, and their challenges are also very, very unique. So Terry, could you tell us what considerations you and Tim took as you were drafting your portion of the document?
Sure. What we realize is that the beneficiaries of all the brilliant work of all these music educators who are on this panel, but also represented by the people on this panel, are the people who direct adult singers who have become passionate in high school and college and can't let singing go. And now occupy the choirs in churches, in synagogues, in community choirs, and they are the most passionate singers we have. They have every reason to not pursue that anymore, and yet they can't not do it. And so I think they experienced a particular woundedness as a result of being forced not to sing together. A couple of realizations pervaded everything that Tim and I worked on. One is that it takes a special passion for singing to hang on 20, 30, 40, 50 years after high school and still commit to once a week rehearsal. And yet those people with the most passion who've hung on for decades are the most at risk to infection from the virus. So safety for these singers has to pervade every decision that a director makes. And sometimes that runs counter to the goals of a parish or the clergy or the governing board of a house of worship. And so we hope that we've provided the support and advocacy for the director who needs to remind those decision makers about the importance of safety for these aging. The second realization is that the unifying challenge of all people who direct choirs and houses of worship is time management. Every church music director faces this very weird proposal that you'll have 52 performances a year, probably fewer rehearsals per year, and you won't have the same individuals at any two of those events. And yet somehow they persist and make choral music at sometimes just an astonishingly artistic level. And so the opportunity that has come through this strange circumstance that we're in is that the time management challenge is turned on its head, because you don't have 52 performances this year. And while you also don't have the rehearsal time to take full advantage of that, you do have the possibility of weekly meetings, even if they're technologically utilized. You know, that if we come back in the fall and houses of worship have live sessions, they still will not be operating at the normal treadmill schedule of 52 performances a year, 50 rehearsals a year. They'll be operating in a different way, and they'll be utilizing instrumentalists and soloists, and there will be less congregational singing if there's any at all. And so Tim and I talked at length about what to do with all that extra time. So we've suggested in our plans for directors to look at their normal pre-COVID rehearsal and see, outside of group singing, what is important in every week's rehearsal. And there are many things. There's the introduction of music. There's the vocalizing of the voice and training the aging voice. There's the discussion of the composers. There's lots of discussion in most of those rehearsals about text, because the text relates to bigger things, to the themes of the liturgical year or of the clergy's sermonic material. There are lots of things that happen in that rehearsal room besides singing. And so we've tried to provide plans for creatively thinking about expanding those things while the group singing is disabled to some extent. And we'd suggest that if directors find that they really are back in their choir room with their singers, distanced from one another and wearing masks and doing all of those things in the fall, probably they should spend some of that time with those aging singers on technology. In the rehearsal room, they should bring their cell phones, and the director can help them to know how the technology works so that they're not intimidated by it. And so that when they are asked to not be present with one another, they really are able to be present technologically anyway. And then in the models that include attendance by some while others are gaining their knowledge technologically, or the model of purely distance singing and learning as all of us are experiencing right now, find a way to connect and build the community that Judy and Joy and Robin and Gretchen spoke of so much. That's such an important part in the house of worship rehearsal. And so find a way to build community, use the technology that may be new to the singers, or they may be very experienced with it but haven't used it in that way. And do those things that are important that exploit this great passion that these singers have until they can sing again and use their passion in the most familiar way with which they're accustomed.
Thank you, Terry. Advocacy is perhaps one of the things that probably is most needed at this point more than ever before, as people decide on whether or not our art form will exist. Lynne, you are known for being a professional at your work on advocacy. Several books on the topic, and I'm just so glad that you and your team were involved in drafting this advocacy statement for us. Could you talk a little bit about that, Lynne, please?
Absolutely. And again, like everyone else has already said, I'm so honored to be part of this amazing writing committee and admire Jessica and the way she handled all of us and our multiple ideas that we threw at her constantly. I do want to make sure, just like Andre mentioned, that the advocacy statement and the advocacy resources and links that were provided, that was a collective group of work from all of the members of the Advocacy and Collaboration Standing Committee. So I want to make sure that everyone knows that it was a joint effort, that they were involved in that. And just like Judy mentioned, I want to build on her sermon, as Tessa said, that if you use the kinds of things that Judy talked about, it's a great way to start that conversation. And it's up to us to continue on telling those stories, making sure that we educate the general public and that we educate all the decision makers in all of our different lives. There are decision makers of deciding whether we're going to have choral music in our churches, our communities, in our schools, at universities, etc. So making sure that we tell those stories constantly about the benefits of the people in our world and their world and how it's helping, rather than a great big global thing that is a general description, something that's personal to them. All of the members of the Advocacy and Collaboration Committee are willing to meet with anyone individually. We don't have the answers, but we'll do our best to listen and maybe provide you some guidance and to get to someone who might be able to help you. And sometimes you might have an issue that you want to talk about privately that's not on the Facebook, the advocacy Facebook page or something like that, or in a forum like this. And so we're all willing and invite you to contact us. And I don't know if any of you had joined us in the 2 previous advocacy conversations we had that we hosted earlier this spring and this summer. We're planning on having another advocacy conversation in July sometime, and we invite all of you to come join us. Again, we don't have the answers, but it's a place that we can all share solutions and opportunities and ideas that we can build on with each other. So I'm going to turn it back over to Lynn now.
Thanks so much, Lynn. You know, the whole advocacy thing I shared at the leadership conference when you were gracious enough to visit with us all about that. I've always thought that advocacy was something that somebody else should do, not me. Now I've totally changed my tune on that and realized that I really took the easy way out, and that the day for that is long gone. That to speak about what we do, and as you say, to tell our story, is so important. I think we've seen that, we've been witness to that just by the responses of our singers on Facebook, of each other. Music is so much a part of what we do, and especially when we're hurting, and so it's something that we need to speak loud and clear on, and never miss the opportunity. So thank you so much. Tim, I understand that you and TESFA worked together on the appendix and that you compiled valuable resources from our members. You know, I really think that this appendix will be something that is such an outstanding tool for others. And I think the most wonderful part of the whole thing is that it's all in one place. And certainly this is a document, there's a living document, and we can add to that. So could you talk to us just a little bit, Tim, about the approach that y'all took for that?
Absolutely. I don't know about you all, but my bookmarks bar over the past 3 months has exploded with online resources. Every thread that pops up, I add it to the list. And so this was actually a great chance for myself and many members on the committee to really look at what's really useful, what's been coming to the top. So TESFA and I sifted through the plethora of online resources, forums, social media threads, and attempted to distill them into broad categories of resources that would be useful for all of our different settings. So we solicited resources from our colleagues on the task forces and beyond, vetting them as best as possible to really highlight some of the most useful resources for all of our ACDA members. So in Appendix A, our members will find 8 pages of hyperlinked websites and forums and even some books. By putting this document out and this appendix out through ACDA, we're not saying that this list is exhaustive, of course, nor is it a specific endorsement of particular platforms. Different solutions are going to work differently in different contexts. We don't have one size fits all choirs, but this is a great place to start. And just a quick logistic note that for our members, even if it doesn't look like a link is hyperlinked because it's not blue and underlined, every single title is an active link. So in the appendix, just briefly, the categories you'll find in there, general guides for our organizations, from ACDA's own research page to the European Choral Association. We know that we have members that are working with technology for the first time in this way, or members of our choirs, so even some beginner guides are there. It includes how-to videos for virtual choirs, how to host a watching party. It addresses the various sight reading platforms. 3 of the 4 synchronous live minimal latency rehearsal platforms that Lou mentioned are included right in this document for you. We'll add the 4th into this living document. For all of our teachers, whether it's in elementary, middle, high school, and collegiate and beyond, we've got sections on pedagogy, interactive learning resources from Kahoot trivia to all sorts of other puzzlers options. We did include a small section on health, and we've included dates on publications of particular studies because, as we are discovering, the data coming out is different, and we learn new things. For example, one of the documents on May 17th by the Universität der Bundeswehr, we think is now not so applicable, but it's important to have that track record of where we are going. And as Lynn mentioned, we have been asking for support in all of our contexts from a national megaphone, and we've included a section that includes 15 different advocacy statements and resources in that section. I just want to say I'm grateful to the members of this committee. It's been an honor to serve, and also to ACDA's leadership, recognizing that we need a national leadership voice at this time. So thank you to you all.
And I would just echo what Tim just shared. It's like, it's so great. I'm grateful to you, Lynn, and to the rest of the committee for having the vision to create this document, this entire document for your constituency. I know that there are so many text messages that I fielded and emails from like March until the release of this document saying, when will National ACDA do something? So just thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I will be singing your praises until I die. So grateful for you for creating this for our choir directors out there. One of the things that Tim and I talked about, specifically about transitioning into environments where students might not have access to technology. I want to quote Joy. She said, technology traffic jams and access issues from home could exist. So even if you have like low latency platforms, or you're trying to use any kind of like virtual platform like Zoom to hold a rehearsal, if you have 5 different people using technology at that home at the same time, that student experience might be deteriorated. So one of the things that Tim and I created was a no access and limited technology plan. And basically it goes from, you can have a no student laptop or tablet. There's a student has access to a computer with a functional USB port. Student has access to a tablet only, or student has access to any phone line but no internet. And you can basically give them some type of musical activities that they can keep singing in their environment. So if you would be on the lookout for that, that's a great addition to what you're looking for. It's on the pedagogy section, and I would say definitely check that out. And another thing, we were really passionate about is like, as we enter the fall, we need to have those conversations on race. And teachers are probably thinking, what do we have at our disposal? And we included some of those resources in this appendix as well. So if you can see Face Your Neighbor, this is on page 93 of the document, 94 of the document. Face Your Neighbor, Anthony Tressa King is providing social justice conversations and learning strategies on what is best practice in the choral classroom when you have these conversations. If you're looking for sheet music that you want your students to basically start the conversation, but have that conversation and dialogue through song, there's a link to the Justice Choir Songbook, which is a free resource for teachers to basically take the conversation prompts from every one of the songs and begin a dialogue in their learning environment. And so those are the things that I would say when you think about equity and inclusion, just be aware that those resources are there as well. Raise Your Voice Labs, where there are people will come into your space and say, let's have a conversation on race and equity. Let's get some ideas out there, and then let's create a musical piece about it. And you can learn more about that in the document as well.
Thank you, Tesfa. This document is fantastic. It's so broad. It covers so many areas, and certainly areas that we all are wondering and hoping that we might be able to incorporate soon as we get into our classrooms, whether or not they be virtual or whether or not they be in person. And I think the membership will find great value in having some of these ideas for planning. I know I will. Everybody is going through this uncertainty. As a choral director, we're taught always to plan ahead. And we always like to know exactly what those steps are. But in this situation, it's out of our hands. And so with that, I say again that there has to be flexibility, and there has to be hope, and there has to be patience, even with your learning skill of trying to integrate all these things together. I want to thank the members of this committee again one more time. Is there anything else that you'd like our members to know, Jessica?
Sure, I'll just close by saying we started by talking about the passion of our directors on this team, and I hope that that has been really evident. Everybody worked so hard and has so much gusto for what they do, and that's really, really obvious. I also encourage you to seek out additional professional development opportunities. You've heard Derek Fox talk about his professional choral collective. Fantastic work that he has put together, really just on his own time because he wants to better the profession. Those are really just honestly inspiring things. You heard Lou talk about the Western region and the fantastic work that they're doing. Troy Robertson and Cora Moore, there are so many ways in which we can continue to grow and develop in our areas of weakness, just like anything else. And you've heard people talk about how context matters. We can't provide a one-size-fits-all. We also will encourage you to stay informed and think about the empirical research that is coming forth to us from Colorado and Colorado State, and to be prepared and be enthusiastic. We know that singers thrive when they see passionate directors and when they know what is being delivered is going to be a quality education. We must always be thinking about equity and how everybody can have a voice and a way to participate in what we do. Writing team, is there anything that I've missed? Anything that you'd like to add that hasn't already been said?
I'm not on the writing team, but I just need to say thank you to the committee, to each one of you colleagues who heeded the call and responded so quickly, to give of your time and just your wisdom. You've given us steps for moving forward, and I for one am very, very grateful. It gives me encouragement, and it also gives me some tools that I can move forward with in my own teaching. I'm very grateful for that. I'm also just grateful for the fact that you joined us today in this webinar. To all of our attendees, thank you for taking time to be with us. And I know that this has been a difficult time for all of us, but you know what? We remain positive. We will move forward. We will get past this, and it will be something that we will, I believe that it ultimately will enhance our profession and that we will learn from and grow from. And so with that said, thank you, committee, from the bottom of my heart. ACDA is indebted to you. And thanks to each of you that every day change lives with the power of music. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.